The war between humans and the Varnak Empire had lasted for decades, leaving both sides exhausted, broken, and filled with grief. Billions of lives had been lost, entire planets scarred, and yet somehow peace had been agreed upon. It was fragile, like a thin thread holding together a storm. To symbolize this fragile peace, the Varnak royal palace received a human soldier, a man who had survived battles that had crushed entire squads. His name was Sergeant Ethan Cross. He was not tall or imposing, but his eyes carried the weight of endless battles, loss, and survival. Scars etched his face and body like quiet warnings of the horrors he had endured, but he moved with calm certainty, a man who knew who he was even when the world tried to tell him otherwise. Ethan had been trained for war since he was a boy, taught to fight, endure, and protect. But what no training could prepare him for was standing in the palace of an alien world, surrounded by creatures who saw humans as weak, fragile, and unworthy. The corridors were massive, gleaming with metal that reflected the strange violet light of the palace. Alien guards with sharp eyes and strange elongated faces escorted him, their silence heavier than words. Every step he took echoed a reminder that here, he was a stranger, an outsider in a world that had called his species enemies for centuries. At the heart of the palace was the young princess, Liara. She was only 19, but her presence was commanding. Her eyes, bright and sharp, could pierce through any lie, any mask, any armor. She had grown up hearing stories of humans, small, fragile, and cowardly. And now a human soldier was standing in her palace. That alone made her laugh silently to herself. She had seen humans in holovids before, had read reports from her generals, but to see one live and breathing, to hear his quiet, steady breathing in her own halls, was almost too absurd to be real. When Ethan was finally brought before her, Liara looked him up and down. The soldier was armored, yes, and the armor carried the scars of battle. Dense burn marks and scratches ran across its surface, each telling a story she could not read. But beneath it, she wondered, what could a human really be? What could survive under all that weakness she had been taught to despise? "So this is the brave human soldier," Liara said, her voice low, mocking. "The one who is said to have fought 10 of my warriors alone? Tell me, do your kind even feel fear?" Her words were like knives wrapped in silk, soft but cutting. Ethan simply stood there. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed but controlled. He did not bow, he did not speak, and he did not flinch. Silence filled the room, stretching longer than her patience could bear. Liara's smirk grew sharper. "Or are you just another frightened little human, hiding behind your metal shell?" she whispered. The sentence was meant to wound, but Ethan's calm gaze met hers, unshaken, almost sorrowful. He did not answer. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and waited, letting the silence speak louder than words. Liara felt a strange irritation rise inside her. How could someone so small, so fragile, command her attention just by doing nothing? Her curiosity battled with her pride. For centuries, the Varnak had looked down on humans as insignificant, unworthy, weak, and yet here was one, standing in the middle of her palace, radiating something she could not define. Fear? No. Courage? Perhaps something stronger, something that made her stomach twist in confusion. "You wear your armor like a cage," she finally said, her voice softer but still laced with sarcasm. "I wonder, if I were to see what's beneath, would I find a human? Or just more weakness?" Ethan's eyes met hers fully for the first time. There was no pride, no anger, only a quiet, steady certainty. "It doesn't hide fear," he said simply. "It hides pain." Liara blinked. She had expected arrogance, excuses, fear. Anything but that. For a moment she saw something different in him, a depth she had not anticipated, and a chill ran through her chest. But before she could reply, Ethan turned his back and walked away, his armor clanking softly against the polished floor, leaving a silence heavier than any words could make. In that moment, Liara realized that the human was not what she had thought, and for the first time she felt a strange, unsettling curiosity. Curiosity that would grow into something far more profound in the days to come. Days passed in the Varnak palace, and each day felt heavier for Sergeant Ethan Cross. He moved quietly through the halls, following orders, training the guards, and observing the strange rhythms of the alien court. But wherever he went, Princess Liara seemed to appear like a shadow, sharp, mocking, impossible to ignore. She would watch him train with the palace guards, her bright violet eyes flicking over every movement, every stance, every breath. And then she would speak, her voice light, teasing, full of derision. "Look at him," she whispered to a nearby guard one morning, her lips curling into a smirk. "The great human warrior. He stumbles like a newborn against even the simplest of our maneuvers." Ethan heard it, of course, but he did not flinch. He did not respond. In his mind, her words were nothing but wind passing through the trees, harsh, noisy, but powerless to break him. He had faced worse than mockery. He had stared death in the face countless times, alone, on planets where no human had survived. This was just noise. Yet her laughter and sneers were not without effect. They carried a weight of expectation, of centuries of prejudice against humans. Every insult she threw was a reminder of what others had always told him, that humans were weak, that they could not endure, that their courage was fragile. And though he had survived, he carried inside him the quiet sting of knowing that she, a single, proud alien princess, had believed the same things. One afternoon, after a training session in the palace courtyard, Liara stepped closer than usual. Her delicate, pale hands rested on the railing as she leaned slightly forward, her smirk sharper than ever. "You move slowly, human," she said softly, almost playfully. "I can hardly imagine you leading anyone into battle without falling flat on your face." The courtyard was empty except for them, and Ethan's calm, steady gaze met hers. He did not smile, did not respond with anger or arrogance. He only breathed slowly, each exhale measured, each movement controlled. "I wonder," Liara continued, her voice like ice sliding over stone. "Do you hide behind your armor because you are afraid? Afraid of what? Pain, death? Or the truth that you are nothing without it?" The words were meant to wound, to provoke, but instead of faltering, Ethan simply nodded slightly. "It doesn't hide fear," he said quietly, his voice calm, almost gentle. "It hides pain." Liara froze. The sound of her own voice, sharp and cutting, lingered in the air. She had expected an argument, a denial, a flinch, but not this quiet honesty. Something in her chest twisted unexpectedly. She had mocked him for days, hoping to see weakness, yet here he was, standing unbroken, carrying scars she could not fully understand. "Pain?" she echoed, her voice softer now. She did not step back, but her smirk faltered. What kind of pain could a human endure that is greater than fear?" Ethan looked at her steadily, his eyes carrying the weight of battles, loss, and nights spent staring at the stars, wondering if he would ever return home. "The kind that does not end when the battle does," he said. "The kind that follows you everywhere. Pain of loss, pain of watching friends die, pain of knowing you survive when others cannot." Liara's eyes widened slightly. She had grown up hearing stories of human cowardice, of weakness, of failure. She had never been told that humans could endure so much and still stand tall. And yet here was proof walking before her, quiet, scarred, and unshakable. But pride would not let her admit it. Instead, she turned her head slightly and said, almost teasingly, "Then maybe your armor is not a cage, but a shield for your soul. Perhaps it is all that keeps you human." Ethan did not respond. He simply turned and walked away, the soft clank of his armor echoing through the courtyard. Liara watched him go, and for the first time she felt a strange, unfamiliar emotion, curiosity mixed with unease. She had intended to mock a human, to see weakness. Instead, she had glimpsed something powerful, something beyond her understanding, and in that moment, she realized that the soldier was not just a visitor in her palace. He was a mirror, showing her the limits of her own understanding and the strength humans could carry beneath the skin, beneath the armor, beneath the fee. The next morning, the Varnak palace woke to an unusual calm. The sun rose over alien spires, casting a violet glow over the polished floors. Sergeant Ethan Cross walked into the training courtyard, but something was different. Today he wore no armor, just a simple fitted training suit, light and unprotected. The guards noticed immediately. Some gasped, some froze, unsure if the human had lost his mind, but Ethan's expression remained calm, almost serene. Princess Liara was waiting, as she always was, her violet eyes sharp and full of curiosity. She could not hide the flicker of surprise when she saw him. The human warrior she had mocked, feared, and ridiculed for days now stood bare of his protective shell, revealing scars that ran across his body like ancient rivers. Deep burns, cuts, and the faint shimmer of a plasma wound over his chest made him look fragile, almost delicate. Yet he carried himself like a man unbroken by the world. "Why? Why are you without your armor?" Liara asked, her voice softer than usual. A faint edge of respect mixed with curiosity, though she would never admit it aloud. Ethan's eyes met hers. "Because it is time you see who I am. Not the machine, not the soldier, but the human beneath it." His voice was calm, steady, carrying a weight that words could barely contain. He began the morning training with the palace guards. No weapons, no armor, just his body and his skill. Each movement was precise, controlled, deliberate. He did not strike to hurt, but to teach, demonstrating balance, timing, and endurance. The guards moved, parried, and lunged, and one by one, they realized the truth. This human, fragile in appearance, was stronger than any of them could have imagined. Liara watched in silence, her smirk gone, replaced by wide-eyed astonishment. She had mocked him, assumed him weak, yet here he was, teaching her own guards, demonstrating strength that came not from weapons or machines, but from sheer will and experience. Hours passed. Sweat dripped from Ethan's brow, but he did not falter. Every scar on his body was a story, a memory, a lesson he carried silently. The guards, exhausted and humbled, bowed to him after the session. Liara, still standing, felt her chest tighten. The arrogance she had worn like armor for years faltered in the face of his quiet courage. Finally, Ethan turned to her. His voice was soft, yet it carried across the empty courtyard. "Strength isn't in the armor you wear, princess," he said. "It isn't in the weapons, the shields, or the technology. True strength is in what survives after they are gone. Courage, resilience, and the will to keep standing. That is what defines you." Liara's lips parted slightly. She had never heard anyone speak like this. Humans, she had always believed, were weak, fleeting, easily broken. Yet this one human, scarred, alone, unarmed, stood taller than anyone she had ever met. Something inside her shifted. It was not fear, and it was not hatred. It was a dawning realization that she had been blind. She took a hesitant step forward. You are not what I expected," she whispered. Ethan's eyes softened, though he did not smile. "And you," he replied gently, "are not what I feared." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The palace guards lingered at the edges of the courtyard, unsure whether to leave or continue watching. The alien sky stretched overhead, indifferent to the quiet tension below. But in that silence, something powerful had begun, a lesson that could not be taught with words alone. Liara began to understand that mockery and fear were useless against a human's quiet courage, and that underestimating someone could be a dangerous mistake. When the sun began to set, casting violet and gold streaks across the palace walls, Ethan collected himself and his belongings. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving the princess to ponder what she had seen. The smirk she had worn for so long was gone, replaced by thought, reflection, and the first stirrings of respect, and for the first time, Princess Liara realized that a human, fragile, scarred, and unarmed, could teach her something far more important than any alien training, lesson or privilege that strength was not always visible, and courage often came in quiet, unassuming forms. The night after the training, Princess Liara could not sleep. She lay in her chamber staring at the ceiling as moonlight spilled across the polished floor. For the first time in her life, her thoughts were restless, filled with images of the human soldier, Ethan Cross, standing unarmed in the courtyard. His body was scarred, yes, but he had moved with a quiet strength that defied everything she had believed about humans. She had mocked him, ridiculed him, and yet he had shown her courage she had never seen before. Liara turned in bed, hugging her pillow tightly. She felt a strange, unfamiliar ache in her chest, a mix of curiosity, guilt, and admiration. How could one human, so small, so fragile, stand against trained alien guards and emerge unshaken? She had expected weakness, yet she had found something far more dangerous: resolve. A human could endure loss, pain, and fear and still stand tall. That thought both frightened and intrigued her. The next morning, she found herself wandering the palace gardens alone. The flowers glowed faintly under alien sunlight, and the air was heavy with the scent of strange, sweet blooms. And there, as if drawn by some unseen force, she saw Ethan sitting quietly on a bench near the fountain. He was polishing his armor. Though he had worn none yesterday, he hummed softly, a human melody she did not understand, but it carried a peaceful weight. Liara approached him slowly, unsure of what she wanted to say. Fear, curiosity, apology, pride. all of it mingled in her chest, twisting together in a knot she could not untangle. "You wake early," she said finally, her voice soft, not mocking, not teasing, just observing. Ethan looked up and gave a small, gentle smile. "The mornings are quiet," he said. "A soldier learns to listen when the world is silent." Liara paused, unsure how to respond. She had come here intending to challenge him, to continue her games of mockery. But the calm in his voice, the quiet wisdom in his gaze, made her words falter. For the first time she felt small, not in body but in pride. Why do you continue to fight?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Even after everything you've lost?" Ethan's eyes softened, looking past her to the distant horizon. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "If I stop, then who protects the innocent? Who prevents suffering from spreading further? Pain never ends. But someone must endure it so others do not have to." Liara felt the weight of his words settle on her like a heavy cloak. She had grown up believing strength came from dominance, from power, from fear. But here was a human, weak by all appearances, teaching her a different lesson. True strength did not roar. It endured. It stood, even when the world tried to crush it. She sat down beside him, careful to respect the silence. For a long time, neither spoke. The fountain trickled, the wind rustled through the alien trees, and Liara realized that she had never felt such calm in her life. Yet beneath the calm, an understanding was forming, a seed that would grow in the days to come. I judged you," she said quietly, almost ashamed. "I mocked you. I thought humans were weak, small, incapable. I see now. I was wrong." Ethan glanced at her, his expression gentle but steady. "People often judge before they understand," he said. "That is natural. What matters is what we do after we see the truth." Liara nodded, a small warmth spreading in her chest. She had always thought herself wise, trained in strategy and diplomacy. Yet this human had taught her a lesson no teacher or book ever could. Courage, resilience, and quiet strength. These were lessons she had never fully learned, but now understood in a way that touched something deep within her. When the sun climbed higher, Liara finally stood. "Perhaps I need to learn more from you," she said, her voice steady now, carrying a new respect. Ethan smiled faintly, standing as well. "Then I will teach if you are willing to listen." For the first time, the princess did not smirk, did not mock. She simply nodded, feeling the beginnings of a bond that neither armor nor rank could define. A connection built on respect, courage, and understanding. And in that quiet moment, Liara began to see a world she had never imagined. One where humans were not weak, but capable of strength that even the most powerful aliens could not measure. Days turned into weeks, and the Varnak palace began to feel different to Princess Liara. The corridors that once echoed with her laughter and mockery now carried quiet footsteps, careful movements, and the gentle rhythm of someone she had come to respect. Ethan Cross had become more than a soldier to her. He was a teacher, a mirror, and, in ways she could not yet name, a challenge to everything she had believed. It began subtly. She would watch him train the palace guards, noting his calm focus and precise movements. She saw how he encouraged them, corrected them without anger, and never demanded more than they could give. Slowly, her curiosity turned to participation. At first, she merely observed, arms crossed, head tilted. Then she asked questions, just a few at a time. "Why do you move this way? Why do you not strike harder? How do you stay calm when they attack?" Ethan answered with patience that astonished her. He spoke of balance, timing, and restraint. He spoke of fear, pain, and endurance, not as obstacles but as teachers. And with every word, Liara felt herself learning more than just combat techniques. She learned humility, empathy, and the kind of courage that did not rely on superiority or technology. One afternoon, the princess decided to try training alongside him. She wore simple garments, leaving behind the silks and jewels that marked her rank. Ethan regarded her quietly, not with judgment, but with a steady, calm curiosity that made her heart beat faster. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Liara nodded, her hands trembling slightly. She had never fought like this before. Never faced someone who moved with such precision and patience. Each motion challenged her, tested her balance, and pushed her beyond what she believed were her limits. And yet Ethan was not cruel. He corrected gently, encouraged, and pushed her to see beyond strength as she had always known it. "You are learning faster than I expected," he said quietly. Not because of skill, but because of determination. Liara's cheeks warmed. She had always believed her status, her intelligence, and her training were enough to command respect. But here, with this human, she realized that nothing mattered if she could not endure, if she could not rise after being knocked down, if she could not stand without arrogance. That night, as she sat alone in her chamber, she thought of the scars Ethan bore beneath his armor. She thought of the battles he had survived, the friends he had lost, and the pain he carried silently. And she realized humans were not weak. They were fragile, yes, but in that fragility lay something powerful, the ability to continue to endure and to protect others even when it cost them everything. When Ethan entered the courtyard the next morning, Liara approached him differently. She no longer carried mockery in her voice, only a quiet respect. I want to understand more, she said simply. Not just how to fight, but why you do it, why you endure, why you keep going even when it hurts. Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm, and nodded. That is a question only you can answer for yourself, he said. But I can show you what it means to stand even when the world tells you to fall. And so, the weeks passed with lessons, training, and quiet conversations. Liara learned not just about combat, but about resilience, humility, and the kind of courage that transcends rank, race, or species. She began to see a truth that had been hidden behind centuries of prejudice, that strength was not measured in armor, weapons, or power, but in the will to endure and the courage to act even when everything seemed lost. For the first time in her life, Liara felt that the human before her, the one she had mocked, underestimated, and doubted, was teaching her something she had never learned from her tutors, advisors, or the stories of her ancestors. You've changed how I see my people, she said one evening, her voice quiet, almost reverent. And how I see humans. Ethan gave a faint smile. Then perhaps peace is not just in treaties and laws, he said softly. It is an understanding. And understanding begins with seeing someone as they truly are, not as you think they should be. Liara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she could not name. She had once mocked this human soldier. Now she was learning from him, growing because of him, and slowly, unknowingly, trusting him with a part of herself she had never shared with anyone. Months passed since Ethan had first arrived at the Varnak Palace. The tension that had once filled the air between him and Princess Liara had softened into a quiet understanding. A bond neither of them fully recognized, yet both felt deeply. Liara had stopped mocking him, stopped questioning his worth, and instead sought his guidance, learning not only about combat but about courage, resilience, and what it truly meant to stand tall against the world. But peace had a price. Ethan's service at the palace, part of the fragile treaty between humans and Varnak, was coming to an end. He had trained the guards, taught lessons of endurance and honor, and left an impression that could never be erased. Now it was time to return to Earth, to the life he had left behind, the planet that had sent him here as a symbol of unity, and the people he had fought to protect. Liara waited for him in the palace garden, her hands folded before her, her usual poise softened by something she could not name. The sun poured over the alien flowers, casting their violet petals in a golden glow. She did not wear her crown or ceremonial robes, only a simple white tunic, loose and flowing, as if she had shed the weight of expectation just for him. Ethan walked into the garden, his steps slow and deliberate. He wore his uniform, polished and formal, but the faint weariness in his eyes betrayed the battles he had survived, the nights spent awake, and the pain he carried silently. He paused when he saw her, his gaze meeting hers with a mixture of respect, gratitude, and something softer, something human that Liara did not yet have words for. "You're leaving," Liara said quietly. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of vulnerability hidden beneath it. "Yes," Ethan replied simply. "My duty here is done." For a moment they stood in silence. The wind rustled the leaves, the fountain trickled softly, and the palace behind them seemed to fade into the background. Liara wanted to say more, to tell him how much he had changed her, how much he had taught her, but words felt small, inadequate. Finally she spoke. "You've changed how I see your kind, and how I see myself." Ethan gave a faint smile, the kind that reached his eyes and carried the weight of unspoken understanding. "Then perhaps peace is not just written on paper," he said quietly. Perhaps it is built in moments like this, in understanding, in trust, and in courage that shows itself quietly. Liara took a step closer, hesitant. I mocked you once, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought humans were weak. I was wrong. I am sorry. Ethan shook his head slowly. No apology is needed. You only saw what you had been taught to see. You have learned, and that is what matters. Her chest tightened. She had always been proud, always in control. But standing here, facing a human who had endured more than she could imagine, she felt small, humbled, and yet drawn to him. Will you come back? She asked softly. Ethan's eyes met hers, steady and honest. I will carry this place in my heart, he said. And if the universe allows, perhaps our paths will cross again. But for now, my duty is elsewhere. Liara nodded, fighting the emotion rising in her chest. She wanted to say more, to hold on to him, to stop him from leaving. But she understood something now that she hadn't before. Courage was not only in standing tall in battle, but also in letting go when the time came. Ethan turned toward the ship waiting beyond the palace gates. Soldiers and guards saluted him silently, their respect evident even from the alien warriors who had once doubted him. Liara watched him walk slowly, deliberately, every step carrying the weight of countless battles survived and lessons taught. Before he boarded, Ethan paused and removed his helmet. He gave her a small, quiet nod. Not the nod of a soldier to a superior, but the nod of a man acknowledging another soul who had truly seen him. Liara felt something stir in her chest, respect, gratitude, and the faintest ache of longing. Then he walked away, boarding the ship, leaving the garden bathed in the glow of a violet sunset. Liara remained standing, silent, the lessons he had taught her echoing in her mind. For the first time she realized that strength was not in armor, not in rank, and not in words or weapons. True strength was in courage, in endurance, and in the quiet dignity of standing unshaken, even when it hurt. And as the ship lifted into the sky, leaving the palace and the princess behind, Liara knew that she had been changed forever. The courtyard was quiet that morning, the violet sunlight spilling across the polished floors of the Varnak palace. Princess Liara stood alone, her hands folded in front of her, gazing at the horizon where the human transport waited. The sound of engines hummed softly in the distance, a reminder that Sergeant Ethan Cross's time at the palace was ending. For weeks she had watched him train, teach, and endure. And for weeks she had felt the slow, unstoppable pull of admiration, respect, and something more she could not yet name. Ethan emerged from the palace gates, his uniform neat, his posture calm but tired, the scars beneath his armor, the countless battles he had fought, the endurance he carried, all of it shone in the quiet way he moved. He did not rush, did not look back too often, but his eyes found hers. There was a weight in them, a depth of understanding, and a quiet promise that his presence had left an indelible mark on her life. You're really leaving, Liara said softly, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. She had practiced words, speeches, even protests in her mind, but none of them felt right. All she could manage was this one simple statement, tinged with the ache of loss she had not expected. Ethan stopped a few steps away, looking at her calmly. Yes, he said. His voice was quiet, steady, filled with a kindness that carried more weight than any battle cry. My duty here is complete. It is time to return home. Liara felt a sting in her chest. She had mocked him, judged him, and thought herself untouchable. Yet now, as she watched him prepare to leave, she realized how much she had learned from him, not just about combat, but about courage, resilience, and the quiet strength of enduring pain without letting it define you. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. You've changed how I see humans, and how I see myself, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Then perhaps that is the most important part of my journey here, he said softly. Not the training, not the battles, but the understanding that can grow between people, even when they are different. The princess stepped closer, a hesitant movement that betrayed the emotions she had kept locked away. I mocked you, she admitted, her eyes glistening. I thought you were weak. I'm sorry. Ethan shook his head slowly. No apology is necessary, he said gently. What matters is that you saw the truth in the end. That is courage too, to admit when we are wrong and to learn from it. The human transport waited beyond the gates, engines humming softly, ready to take him away. Ethan turned toward it but paused before stepping onto the ramp. He removed his helmet, the symbol of the soldier he had been, the armor that had hidden his pain and scars. With bare head and calm gaze, he looked at Liara one last time. There was no pride, no arrogance, only a quiet dignity that demanded respect. Liara's breath caught in her throat. She had spent weeks learning from him, training with him, watching him endure challenges that would have broken almost anyone. And now he was leaving, walking away, not just from the palace, but from the part of her life he had touched so profoundly. Ethan gave her a small nod, the gesture simple yet heavy with meaning. He walked up the ramp, each step deliberate, each movement filled with quiet strength. As the ship lifted, its engines humming steadily, Liara watched him disappear into the sky. The wind stirred around her, carrying the faint scent of alien flowers and the echo of the lessons he had taught her. In the courtyard, Liara stood alone. The silence was no longer mocking. It was filled with understanding. She had seen the truth in a human soldier, a man who could endure pain, inspire respect, and change hearts without raising a weapon. She realized that true strength was not in armor, rank, or technology. True strength was courage, endurance, and the quiet will to stand even when the world expected you to fall. Tears pricked her eyes, though she did not let them fall. She bowed her head slightly, not in sorrow but in gratitude. For the first time, she understood the depth of humanity, and she knew that she would carry Ethan's lesson in her heart for the rest of her life. And in that moment, Princess Liara understood something profound. Courage is not shown in victory alone. It is shown in standing tall, in enduring pain, and in walking away with dignity, just as a human soldier had done, leaving her forever changed. The ship disappeared into the violet sky, taking Ethan Cross away, but leaving behind something far greater than his presence, a lesson in humanity, strength and courage that no armor could ever contain. Courage, a single choice to protect, could change the fate of worlds, because sometimes the smallest human action could shine brighter than the stars, alike, what it truly meant to be human.